some companies out there, they have already software which composes music, so creative music. Yeah, I mean, that's
I'm going to go to bed now.
That's interesting. So if this kind of software gets super effective, then we lose all our jobs, right?
I mean, I want to watch a director have a spotting session with an AI.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you very much for having us here in your studio.
Welcome.
And now tomorrow NUM starts, and that's the perfect opportunity to talk a little bit about music technology. And most of the people know you from you as a composer, but you were also one of the pioneers that brought us MIDI. And now with having MIDI 2 on the horizon, it would be super interesting to know how this could affect writing in a DAW, especially in working with orchestral sample libraries.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, we've had MIDI for 40 years, and I was about 1 year old when we started it. And, obviously it was a huge deal. Nobody knew the impact it would have back then on how it would allow so many talented people to have a career in music who wouldn't have otherwise, because it was so expensive to produce music before MIDI and all of the tools that came around MIDI with the instruments, the modules, and DAWs. And now we are 40 years later, and it's such a mature technology. It works incredibly well. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It exists. You don't even think about it. Nobody thinks about MIDI, and there's no reason to. It's just it's like talking to a fish about water. But now there's a new level of sophistication that's about to come to MIDI, where it will allow us an even better opportunity to not have to think about technology. I think everybody here knows that feeling of you have an idea, you want to get it down before it goes away, and then something goes wrong, and suddenly where's the sound, and it's the wrong pluck, it's the wrong whatever. So the way MIDI is going to continue to grow is to take a lot of that worry away, so that now MIDI understands the orchestra. There's a whole layer of MIDI that is geared only towards organizing orchestral music, orchestral instruments and samples, so that you don't have to think, well, with this library, this is how I do key switching to go from pizzicato to tremolo, and with this one it's different. Now it becomes part of that sort of universal, the technology is there, so I don't have to think about it. And then it's going to do a few other things. It's going to be a little more high res. It's going to take away some other barriers of having to think about, can I do this or can I not do this? Technology is best when it just makes our lives simpler and easier, more creative, and you can get 1 more hour of sleep a night.
Yeah, I think what we definitely need is also a kind of a standard on where I can find which articulation. I mean, we all know this process of building templates and to get different libraries from different developers into one template, and to use them with the same key switches, with the same controls. And I think MIDI 2 could be an answer to this. And but it's all in progress, right? And I mean, even there could be also the situation of having maybe in the future kind of a DAW specially tailored for film composing or for media composing. And what do you think? How could this affect your writing? What do you would like to see from a DAW, especially made for a media composer?
I mean, personally, I've worked in Pro Tools, Logic, and Cubase. And I think they're all tailored to various things. Pro Tools is very tailored to audio mixing, and then Cubase, I feel, is actually fairly tailored to film scoring. And then Logic is drifting more towards production music and songwriting. It's really hard to say because I think Dorico in Cubase could actually become the bridge where you could write in sheet music but then have the mock-up being created in the background. That would for me be the dream, where I could just write a score in an actual notation program or on a staff pad by hand on my couch, and then in the next room the mock-up is being created with all the articulations and all the dynamics I'm drawing into the sheet music. That would be great if we could eliminate the step where I have to draw in, CC data endlessly and fix stuff endlessly and double things endlessly. So that would be wonderful.
There's a lot of potential there, especially in the collaboration between those two platforms, Cubase and Dorico. Yeah,
I think so.
And where do you see your I would say pain point, or the situation where you really get problems in working with sample libraries? So where do you think, or how do you think we could do this much more fluid and more easy and intuitive to work with?
Since MIDI was conceived, it's kind of stagnated a little bit. There was MPE and whatever else that has kind of aided it, but technology for sampling has just kind of gotten better and better. What you guys are doing in other companies, the technology itself and how great those samples sound, and MIDI just hasn't caught up. Mm-hmm. So now we're at this moment where we have an opportunity to catch up a little bit to the technology and use it to its fullest. I feel like the sample pool itself isn't being utilized to its fullest capability. So to try and imagine something that we don't currently have is kind of like something that breaks your mind a little bit. Because imagining saving hours of your day not having to do string automation or having independent voices on just one hand and the key switching problem and being able to do that in an entire stack versus a singular track. There's an infinite number of possibilities in orchestral music alone, but then you get into the possibilities of assigning the potentially endless amounts of data to synth programs and being able to be like Vangelis without thousands of dollars worth of equipment, and the possibilities are frankly a little endless.
How do you write music?
How do I write music? Well, I think like everyone here, I write with a DAW or DAW. I use Cubase and I monitor through Pro Tools and mix in Pro Tools. But I learned to write with paper and pencil, but I've been programming for so long now that I think I'm a much better sight reader looking at like a piano roll than I am with. I still obviously read music, but I think I'm more comfortable reading like the MIDI matrix than I am reading like a score now, just because I do it every day, all day, and the only time I look at a score is right before a scoring session or at a scoring session.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It happened to me too, that all of a sudden when you read the piano roll, you just read it like a score and not like the piano roll anymore.
Yeah, I mean the piano roll itself, and that's the interesting part of it is that you don't just have the notes, you also have the expression underneath, and that's what I find super interesting compared to regular score editor where you just have the notes. And that's why if you I don't know write music directly into Sibelius, it sounds super MIDI-ish because you have to control the dynamics and everything. And I could imagine that maybe in the future somehow AI could help here to make kind of a expression automatically in a way so that you really concentrate on what you write. I don't know.
That's an interesting idea. Traditional music notation is a way of writing down a composition, but it doesn't write down the performance.
Yeah.
The piano roll is a performance because it's the nuance of how long the notes are, the difference in playing a chord on a piano or some instrument where the top note's a little loud. I mean, all of that is about expression. So in a way, modern sequencers and DAWs really represent music in a much more musical way than traditional music notation. Yes, at some point you want, if it's an orchestral score, to move it into the realm of notation. I find it really amazing to me, anybody who composes in notation electronically. that it's going to become a sample. It seems like you're doing everything twice almost. But it works. And there are those composers who need that ability to see, well, what was the piccolo playing in that bar because I want to do something in the viola, but I can't if I can't see it. So having score is that way of relating one part of the orchestra to another, and sometimes even just having it visually, you start to see how dense is it getting. Maybe I've overwritten, maybe it's a little too thick, maybe it's a little too thin. I love the fact that in modern sequencers, I use Logic, and I work in the score page all the time. It's my page of regrets. It's where I go back and realize, this could have actually been a lot better, and here we go. That nuance, because, what's the first step of composing? You write it, and then you have to get a director or producer to say, that's great. That's a great piece of music. It really moved me. And the notes by themselves aren't that emotional until you've added that expression. And yeah, if there was the opportunity, there should be a way to do this somewhat automatically, because if you give sheet music to a violin player, they know that if there's some whole, several bars of a note, they're not just going to sit on that note. It's going to swell.
Yeah, it's amazing. When you work with like good session players, like in LA, I don't even give them dynamics, and usually their first take, I'm like, "Wow, you phrased that unbelievably."
Yeah, better than we could.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, that's exactly what I meant.
Yeah,
but it's the same. It's the same with articulations, right? So of course, if you have a staccato or so, then you just write it on the score, and then it becomes visible for the musician as well. But beside that, all the attack and everything, the expression, it all depends also on how long is each note and in which context will this note be played. And I think a kind of a DAW, especially made for film composers or media composers, could be something that also looks what comes in the future somehow and picks the right articulations.
Are you talking in code right now? Because it sounds to me like you're actually telling us something you're doing.
No.
Because you're 100% right. Because with contemporary samples going from slow to fast, right, to aggressive to smooth to legato, you can't just play it, because you're right. The sequencer, if it can predict a little bit, you bet you could be a lot more expressive, that we don't have to do key switching or switch to another track on the sequencer and all that crap.
I mean, I always thought it should be possible if you're playing a line and that it detects by note length what articulation you mean, right? When I'm playing a short note, that it automatically detects, okay, she meant staccato, or she meant spiccato, or she meant marcato.
I feel like at least the precursor to that is here, right? If you have, like, there's legato patches that exist that, depending on how fast you play it, know whether you're doing like a slurred run or whether this was like a bow or a portamento, and it switches kind of on the fly and does a really good job at that. So it's just kind of, applying that to the full range of articulations.
Yeah,
right.
That would be great.
Yeah, but this is also, it's important to in this situation that you play something and then afterwards it could apply it automatically, I guess, because it never
some sort of look ahead that can predict in milliseconds at a time what you're going to be doing.
Or on this way, yeah. But you need some spare information about the note length and stuff, and that's what it makes super complex. Because I got quite often the request of having kind of an automatic articulation switching, but it's practically nearly impossible. Maybe with a kind of super futuristic AI technology, but this is also super interesting because there are some companies out there, they have already software which composes music, so creative music. Yeah, I mean that's interesting.
I'm going to go to bed now.
That's interesting. so probably in future,
Sam Estes.
Sam S is working on something like this.
Sam.
But
We
the
see
question
you,
is,
Sam.
We know you're watching.
I want a job next year, Sam.
but the thing is, if this kind of software gets super effective, then we lose all our jobs, right? Because there's no copywriting, nothing.
Not really, though, because what are they trying to replace? They're trying to replace tracks that are pretty nondescript, pretty bland. They're trying to basically eliminate the lowest tier, I would say, of library music that goes into reality TV. That is just filler music that is not supposed to say anything, that has very little emotional content. You know, it's more a tool for music editors for those types of shows that are looking to, you know, just place this type of stuff. This is not going to replace storytelling in TV or documentaries or movies, because in order to understand storytelling, an AI would have to understand subtext and story and human emotion and
Oh, it
hit
does.
point.
You know it does.
Siri knows.
I guess it will be possible for AI software to create emotional sounding string arrangements. So that will be possible. But of course, you're absolutely right. The software can't just watch the movie and getting all the subtext of it.
I mean, I want to watch a director have a spotting session with an AI and explain to the AI what they mean by...
You have some checkboxes. Right?
Certainly, but I think during our lifetime, that's going to be really hard to do, because you would have to have computers understand human emotion and really subtext and all those things that we barely understand. We can barely figure it out, and you know.
What I think would be super cool to have is a kind of an AI technology that just watches the music or listens to the music you've already written. Maybe if you're composing for a TV series or so, and you have written the first few cues, that it goes through the cues and it detects the little motifs and the little I don't know, the little themes in between, and stores this in a way and makes you some offers. So something like kind of pre-arranged, pre-orchestrated versions of the motifs you've written
I mean,
before.
that would be more of an assistant than a composing assistant, which I would love. I mean, Sibelius has some plugins that already do that, where you can type in a motif and then say, give me variations on that, and give me this inversion and that inversion and an augmentation, and you can make an idea collection. It has that feature. So I actually use that sometimes. So it's kind of like an AI cheater that you can use. I see AI as something that we're going to use to collaborate with, something that makes our life easier.
Yeah.
Not something that will steal our jobs and replace us, but rather something where you can teach it how to clean up MIDI for the orchestrator, and it will do that for you. Or where you can teach it how to print stems, and it will just do that for you. And you know, all these tasks that I really don't need to be doing all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. And what do you think where the sample library would become in, I don't know, in 2, 5, 10 years from now on?
I mean, where can it go with the contact engine? That's kind of the question. Because I remember when we made Cinestrings, we really, at Cinesamples, where I started, we really hit the limitations of contact of that engine, and the amount of groups you can do, the amount of round robins, the amount of velocity. So really the question is, for me, who's going to invent the next great engine that will allow sample library developers to do more deep sampling?
Maybe it's the sign player, perhaps.
I mean,
Tell us all about it.
I mean, we are working super hard, and of course, it's a kind of for us, it's a kind of a basement or a kind of a base for creating new innovations on top of that. But it's a super tough work. We had I don't know 15 developers working on it for several years to get to the point where we are now. But at the end, it's a very tough it's a very tough development, because this whole streaming thing of thousands of voices at the same time, that's it's not an easy task. You have to come up with super clever ideas, and it sounds easy in theory, but practically you have many developers working on it and trying to push performance even further. And Yeah, but of course things like we did with the mic merging, for example, that's something I really wanted to have, because this kind of limitations that you just have one microphone position at your fingertips, or let's say 2 or maximum 3, and if you dial in all the complete orchestra, then you're at your performance limits. That's a problem, and to being able to merge them all on your custom mix, I think it's a great feature, and also the articulation design, how you switch articulation. So we really wanted to push out new innovations, and to make the composer's life more easy with it. But it's for us also it's a long way, and when we are talking about AI and things that were like a DAW, and those are all things that will take years and years of development to achieve something like this. And our
Could you have it by the fall, though?
no way.
You know. I mean, I think what you've done with the sign player is a big step forward. You know, I mean, you're absolutely right. Everybody who's developed for Contact, which has become the industry standard, and I have a small company that develops contact-based instruments. You hit your head on the technology all the time. So while you're trying to think about music and creativity and sound and expression, instead you're having to worry about, oh, we're hitting a maximum, oh, too much CPU. I mean, the good news is that computers keep getting faster, RAM keeps getting cheaper. You know, obviously, samples are a brute force technology. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a photograph of performance, and it's frozen in time. You know, physical modeling has this fluidity that's wonderful, except it sounds like crap. So you have this technology that brings something fresh to expression because it has like overtones that crackle, and you can do these very cool things in physical modeling, but it still sounds very artificial. And it's also all based around a solo instrument, which is like, okay, great. Now, in the future, it would be great to see sampling start to become even more fluid. I mean, you have this thing where you merge microphones, but eventually you could be merging performances, merging articulations, because one of the great things about what you're doing is you're allowing the artist, I use that word loosely, you're allowing the artist to make some choices. And at the end of the day, isn't it great that I would use your engine, and you would use, and you would use, and you would use it, and it would each sound a little different. You know, you talk about, well, where's the future? The future is you've already kind of started it with the ability to customize the sound of the orchestra to the liking of the composer without the brute force of, well, here are 12 microphones. So every time I hit one note, you know, I'm triggering 60 voices in a sampler that can only go up to, you know, less than 1,000. Which and my computer's getting angry at me, and you know, smoke's coming out. So you've started the process of thinking of it as a step between things like AI and machine learning and tools that can craft and shape. For some people, the traditional sound of orchestra isn't necessarily what they're looking for. You know, Tom Newman is a great example of somebody who said, you know, the orchestra doesn't have to sound like John Williams or the traditional composers. It can be something more ethereal, something more ambient. I love that. For me, any technology that lets me make something very personal without making it my life's work to just customize it, that's a great thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. For example, we have in Berlin Woodwinds 3 different flutes, 2 different oboes and stuff.
I love that.
I mean,
Really?
it's great, but you have to go through through every single flute, and you have to program it. And of course, you have for each of them your own expression curve, and that's why it sounds super natural. But I think this is something that players could do in future, that you just play a chord or so, and then do you have automatic kind of a DVZ option or something. Same for articulations, that it supports you. I mean, I had many interviews with other composers and stuff, and I had a feeling that many composers are just loading in legato, spiccato, and sustains, and maybe marcato or so. But that's really something special then. And of course, you can do nearly everything out of it, because you can use the spiccato to sharpen the attack of the sustain and stuff by layering. But there are so many different articulations that we capture in our sampling process, and there's so much potential. But it's just hard to integrate it into workflow,
And
because
it just takes time. Yeah, it just takes time.
It's opportunity cost, right?
Especially if you're eventually recording it, it's just, you get this idea out with like a full strings patch and spiccato and marcatos to where it sounds very presentable and good, and then you know what your intentions are when you get on the scoring stage, and it's just not worth, the extra 2 hours of tweaking like these special articulations and stuff when you're going to record it anyway.
Yeah, the bottom line of all of this technology, at least to me, is, like I was saying, opportunity cost. It's cutting down on time you spend not creating. Because as you increase the amount of creative time you have to create music and write, and I use the word create loosely, but if we don't have to worry about scrubbing through patches, if they're at our fingers immediately with, in sign with MIDI 2.0, or, we don't have to worry about articulations or scrubbing through the 6 viola patch and the 7 viola patch. It's like, oh, which one's great for this cue? Why do I have to choose that? I think that's why people end up using a limited set of articulations, because the clock is ticking, and the more time they spend on that is the less output they have. So if there was a standardized way or an easier thing to facilitate that process, I think we'd all be a little richer and
I think this is
a little happier.
This
Little
is
happier.
definitely
Or at least
of course.
I'll have to find something else to do to procrastinate
Exactly.
or something.
Yeah, right.
Fortunately, that well is bottomless. For any composer like this group, where we're on the clock, and it's like we know what needs to get done, and we know how much time we have, and we'd love to try to get a few hours of sleep in a night. It's not what you can do, it's what you can do in 15 minutes. Sometimes it really just comes down to, if I had more time, I'd work on this harder, but I don't, so I won't. And that's, in some cases, that's okay. I think as composers, we deal kind of with 3 things. One is the emotional content of the music. Does the music express something emotionally that tells the story that we've been hired to assist in? And probably nothing is more important than that. Number 2 is, how good does it sound? The bar is pretty high for production quality. So using excellent samples, reverbs, synthesizers, so that because we wear many hats. We're composers, but our job isn't to deliver sheet music. Our job is to deliver a recording of a piece of music that is exceptional in every possible way. So everybody who is a composer for screen is in essence a record producer. We are paid to deliver the final product, which has many layers and steps to it. So we choose our tools very carefully, that they express who we are and what we're trying to do it at a super high level, make it sound great, because sometimes our music is incredibly simple. So the sonic quality and the production quality and the nuance, and that's where you kind of get into that third aspect of performance, that if we're simulating it for our, ultimately we only work for an audience of one person sometimes, the director or the producer. Ultimately, only one person says, "You're done." And that's an important person. And those people are jaded. They're used to hearing really high quality music. They often have, a collection of film scores worth millions of dollars in production quality. And so we are constantly up against writing music that hits the mark emotionally, hits it in terms of production quality, and has the nuance and performance that gives that emotion. If we talk about AI, we're hired to be human beings. I think most composers are human, right? We've met a few where you go, what's the deal here? But generally
the exception
speaking,
of Sam software.
well, actually, I agree that I think the greatest thing that AI could do is become an assistant in a way of saying, what about this? What about this? I can show you based on thousands of compositions. This might be a way to phrase this cello part. That would be amazing. Wink, wink. And
there was this certain time where we had this transition from going from hardware samplers to software samplers, and Hans Zimmer was
I was
the
part
first.
of that. Yeah,
and you were a part
Giga.
of it.
So
Giga
Air One was
Studios.
Giga, right?
We did it. Giga Studio and some mock-ups in
But,
some
but
other
you were
samplers.
you were gone by Sam, or were you still around?
I was gone before Sam.
Okay.
Steve still works with those samplers. It was the death of me. 'Cause
Steve,
you have to print
Jablonski.
'cause
You have to print into Pro Tools.
everything in real time into Pro Tools, and you only have a limited amount.
It's the only reason I don't
inputs.
have them is because it's just such
I
a
was
headache
just sitting there at
printing.
5 a.m. and I was like,
But
this
it
is
was
the
amazing
least
for that
efficient
time.
way
But it's
to do it.
it's amazing the way that Hans works with the way that I still listen to him and his team's mock-ups, and I am just, because he writes for those it's just his sound. I don't know how to describe it. And
Of course.
just sounds so good. And you couldn't write it, if John Powell used them, it would just sound like, whatever samples again. Yeah. But the way that Hans uses them, it's just, he uses the samples as, he records orchestra and then ends up barely using it in the final mix. He tucks it in under the samples, the reverse of what other people do.
It's farm to table, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting about sample libraries in general, whether it's the Hans Zimmer samples, and I worked on the first generation and then a little more, and is how much your choice of samples changes how you compose. Mm-hmm. And in a way, in one way, it shouldn't. Mm-hmm. The music should be the music, and the samples are at the service of the music. But because we're not working exclusively with notation, where we're not even thinking about performance, because we tend to mostly think about performance, the samples very much affect many of our, for me certainly, decisions that we make compositionally, because you play a certain sample and it just sounds really good in this range. Well, I'm going to write in this range because it sounds fucking awesome. Mm-hmm. Another sample library might sound better somewhere else. Some sample libraries are a little better with the fast parts, and some are better with the high stuff, which is why a lot of composers mix and match. No offense. And I personally don't have a problem with the idea, and I don't know how you feel, that my choice of samples, just like my choice of synths and other parts of the music, very much affect how I write. I am reacting to the instrument under my fingers in real time, and it's making me change what I do because something might just feel so good, that bass note just feels so good, I'm going to hold it a little longer. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not that, crude. Sometimes it is. But do you find that your samples have any influence on your composing?
I guess it depends on several things. So I try not, if I'm recording, I try not to, but it's just kind of subconscious. When you're like, this sounds really good, you just kind of gravitate towards it. And the other thing that, if I'm not recording orchestra, then I'm very aware of it, because it just has to sound, that's the final sound. So however you're programming it, however the samples sound, the way you've programmed it, that's kind of it. And the other thing kind of depends on the director producer. I know if you have a good relationship with them and they kind of trust you, or if they're not crazy, need the most insane demos, if things kind of get into a register where they don't sound well or they don't sing, or you're kind of playing some sustain patch or legato patch that's kind of just sloshy as you move through the notes, that you can get away with it. I will kind of try, and I won't get too hung up on the samples. But everyone works with someone who just gets really hung up on the demos, and then once again you're kind of back to what you can make which you can make sound good.
Right. We all have that kind of blank test where you're scrubbing through samples and you're just slamming on middle C and you're like, no. You're like, this is why I don't use violas, and you just like keep going. And I think when you like strike that gold, there's like a moment where you're like, oh yes, this sample can do in my mind exactly what I want, and then that kind of steers you in a direction to do something inspired around that.
But that's why I find it super interesting also to use many different articulations instead of just using spiccato, sustains, and legato. And that's for many composers the case, that they just load in those articulations, but there are many other things that a library has to offer. Let it be kind of ornamentations or different lengths of short notes. And I think definitely if you just have spiccato loaded, then of course this will affect your composition. And also that different libraries have different kind of quality suited to the music you perform. And this is why I think each sample, what you mentioned before, is each sample is kind of a snapshot of a performance that you capture. And this could work for the one situation, and it could be that for another situation it would be completely not the perfect sample for what you're looking for.
Sure, and articulations, at least, and maybe I'm the only one guilty of this, are just like recommended suggestions too. At least in some libraries where I'm like going through, I'm like, that staccato will sound really great with this marcato, sure. And then you'll like smash them together. I'll make this mental note, save it as a channel strip. So really I'm like going through and building a roadmap how to accomplish what exactly I am trying to do with the production if I'm not working with an orchestra. Having that liberty is a lot different, but as soon as you move into higher quality libraries, you can kind of separate yourself from that thinking.
Yeah.
If the articulation that it says is very true to the performance, and that picture, that snapshot is truly what they're labeling it as.
I mean, I don't write like that. Sorry, guys. I'm one of those people that has two computers, and so one of them is loading everything into VE Pro.
Sure.
So I have all the libraries I have loaded at any time and all the articulations. So I don't bother. If I want a specific articulation, it's right there. I just use it. It has something.
Do you have all the articulations on different tracks, or do you
I
have
do use split
multi-patches?
patches. I'm not a fan of using everything on one track for the sole reason that most library developers, not knocking on you of course, don't have the volumes between articulations right, and the negative pre-delays.
That's part of the reason. Like I do have all the articulations loaded, but it's like if you want to do like that little grace note thing, and it's like
it just doesn't
like
work.
it gets this high on the meter, and I'm like, I'm just never gonna use this thing.
The volumes aren't right balanced between the articulations, and then the negative pre-delays you have to have on the different articulations are also not the same in shorts and longs. So sometimes I will have various shorts. If the library is programmed well and the shorts are all the same, I will have all the shorts on one track and all the longs on one track, and then specialty stuff like trills and trems and whatnot on a third track. But for the most part, I use split patches just for that reason, because most libraries are not consistent enough. And then I just program them all the same way, so that I basically, if I'm programming strings, say in Cinematic Studio Strings, I just program all 5 tracks once, and then all the other string libraries I'm using are programmed and volume balanced the same way. So I just copy paste them into that. And then you get this gorgeous string sound of 5 string libraries playing at the same time. So I don't really let the sound influence myself so much. With synthesizers I do. If I have a really fat bass patch or something, that influences how I'm going to orchestrate, of course. But for the most part, I also usually have live recording, so I don't really care. If something doesn't work so well in the samples, I'm like, well, it's going to be dubbed with. We mix in the samples a lot, but it will have live players on top of it, so I don't care. I will program or compose a little bit towards the samples when I know we will not have live recording. Then I will play to the strengths of the samples. But something I found is that if you know how to orchestrate well, and you really let the instruments play the way they would in reality, in their strong range, that's where they will always sound best. And so if you know how to write for an orchestra, then you will inevitably probably also get somewhat decent mock-ups because you're writing for the strengths of the instruments.
I also think it's so important to have a kind of an inner ear to getting an impression on the different volume relations of all those different instruments.
Yeah.
You know, it's very true. What you say is so right on, that knowing how to write for orchestra changes everything. No sample gives you that. I've heard composers who write using really very basic, not even very good samples, but they really know how to write for orchestra, and their mock-ups sound really good sometimes. You know, just the right voicings and maybe the right reverb a little bit, but it's amazing how different it sounds when you actually know how to voice things and how to complement the sections and the ranges and how to fill in what's going on. There's no sample library that can replace that.
Yeah, I think most beginners try to compensate balancing issues by just adding more plugins and EQs and stuff. And that's not necessary. I mean, if the balancing is right, and if you hear how loud are my strings compared to the French horns, or how loud is the flute compared to the clarinet or whatever, then it's you do the volume and expression perfectly, so that you get this kind of full orchestral impression out of it.
There's some great film scores that were recorded with 5 microphones.
Yeah, sure. That's. And I mean, plugins are mainly there to just shape a sound, or adding a very specific reverb on top, or to use it as an artistic tool. Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much all for this discussion about technology, where libraries could be in future, and what you miss and what you think the future can bring us on a new technology.
Thank you for everything that you and your amazing group have done to make our lives just a little easier.
Thank you very much.
Sad cheers with empty
But
glasses.
hey, you guys, you have empty
Forget
glasses.
this is like my 4th
So
glass
you have
of
to
wine.
fill it again.
I have bad news.
Okay, anyway, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.